let's cover some theory. The Kuleshov Effect. A quick bit of vocabulary. Throughout this, when we're bringing up examples, we're going to be talking about the editor, and we're going to be using this title in the abstract, in the same way that we do when we're discussing the author. We're not necessarily talking about the individual who does the editing, as much as we're talking about the concept of the person who does the editing. Because in reality, it might be several people, or it might be one. And here's a link if you want to know more about that. Also, our examples are going to be taken mostly from 10 Cloverfield Lane, a 2016 film with pretty solid editing all around.
And his stumbling around isn't helping anything. What you heard earlier was him knocking over a shelf with a whole week's worth of food, which he's sorry for, correct?
Totally.
Let's go.
So, Lev Kuleshov was a Soviet filmmaker in the early 20th century, but really, he was a theoretician. He made movies, but he was more interested in the ideas of how movies worked, in particular the psychological mechanics of editing. Now, if you go and read up on this, you're going to see the word montage a lot, so I think this is a good moment to maybe clear this up. The thing to keep in mind is that this was literally a century ago. The roots of modern film theory largely originated in France in the 19-teens, so the first waves of film theory in America, England, Germany, and the Soviet Union heavily borrow the French vocabulary. French writers differentiated editing into two concepts: couper, or cutting, the mechanical process of putting the film together, and monter, the creative act of editing, of which the end product is montage. So, while modern English theory uses the word montage to describe a specific kind of sequence, where a series of mostly discontinuous clips are shown in fairly rapid succession, the early use of the word montage refers to what we would today simply consider editing. This is important to keep in mind because if you're reading old theory, it's easy to trick yourself into thinking that the theories only apply to what we call a montage, but really these ideas apply to all editing. So in the early 1920s, Kuleshov is teaching at the Soviet National Film School, and he's telling his students, he's writing that the soul of cinema is in the edit. It's in the way that two shots interact. In fact, he argues that acting itself can be completely suborned by editing. It is not the actor that matters, it is the cut. More meaning, he says, is created by the interaction of two shots than by any shot in isolation. To demonstrate this, he puts together a famous editing exercise. An actor sits and stares at the camera with a blank expression. This shot is then intercut with a number of other images: war footage, a hot meal, children playing, and so on. The perception on the part of the audience is that the face takes on the implications of reaction, the neutral expression looking sad or hungry or worried, in turn following the war, food, and child. The meaning is created not from either the A shot or the B shot, it is created from the juxtaposition of the two. Because there's a couple of things going on here. First is the idea of eyeline. This is another thing that we addressed briefly in Suicide Squad, the instinct to follow someone's eyeline, that if someone on screen is looking somewhere and we cut away, it is assumed that the B shot is the thing that they are looking at, even if A and B aren't factually anywhere near each other. A character looks somewhere in the A shot, we assume the B shot is what they were looking at. The second is the idea of meaning, or what it means when we say meaning. The instinct is to assume that it's a deeper metaphorical kind of meaning, that we're saying theme and value are created by the interaction of two shots. And while that is true, metaphor is created by the interaction between shots, it's also a lot more mundane. It's the kind of thing you're not even thinking about. Let's look at that Cloverfield shot again. The meaning that's created is that these two shots are in the same space. The meaning is a better understanding of the geography of that space. The meaning is, this is what Michelle is seeing. The very next cut is to a close-up of the slaughtered pigs. Even though this is not contiguous with Michelle's actual field of vision, it is not a literal point of view shot because human eyes don't have a zoom function, it is emotionally contiguous. By cutting from far to close, the editor is saying that this is important. They are highlighting the emotional impact, the sense that a shocking thing seems to consume our focus. Then, Kuleshov effect in full force, the editor cuts back to Michelle for her reaction. A shot, B-shot. The simple fact that we are even able to describe this as a reaction shot is owed to this psychological phenomenon. This forms the logic behind the rules and dialect of film editing, the shot-reverse shot of dialogue, the progression from establishing shots inward to close-ups, the preservation of screen direction through travel, and so on. Because this meaning becomes inherent to the sequence, a careful consideration of placement, order, and timing is necessary to both create desired meaning and to avoid undesired meaning. Now, what do I mean by undesired meaning? Well, mistakes mostly. Confusion is a kind of meaning, in the same way that incomprehensible noise is still an audio signal. This is actually an important paradigm shift in the way that you look at editing. A bad edit, Suicide Squad, isn't generally bad because of some inherent mechanical failure. It's bad because it creates undesired meaning. It creates confusion when confusion wasn't intended. This car crash is confusing because it's supposed to be confusing. You're supposed to get disoriented. It's emotionally and narratively appropriate. Thus, the confusion becomes an aesthetic choice rather than a mistake. Now, one of the things that I do need to bring up. I've recreated Kuleshov's demonstration here, but you're probably thinking to yourself that it doesn't work nearly as well as I'm insisting that it does, and there's a couple reasons for that. First is that you, as a viewer, have grown up your entire life watching movies and television. The language of film, the language of continuity editing, is very natural to you. You are used to quickly picking up on the visual cues of environment, so discontinuous location is more likely to trip you up. Second is resolution. I'm showing you these images in full color, high definition, where Kuleshov's original experiment would have looked a lot more like this. This lower resolution is important because it taps into another related idea, which is closure. Now, this is a subject all its own, but the core is that the more iconic or cartooned something is, the easier it is to accept discontinuities or unrealities. Now, to wrap this up, I do want to throw in some caveats. The edit is the final interpretive stage in creating a movie, in building its meaning before it is handed over to the audience, and owing to that position, it is so powerful in its ability to reshape meaning that all the prior stages, writing and performance, reposition themselves to accommodate. Things are written and performed with an eye towards the edit. Kuleshov was being purposefully dramatic about the all-consuming power of the edit in creating the meaning of film, the ability to erase the actor, but only a little bit. This quirk of our brains, this perception of continuity and relation between two disconnected images, is second only to the perception of motion itself in how fundamental it is to the very structure of cinema.